Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Only Podcast. My name is Chris Vanini, your host, as always, and I'm joined by theonlycolors.com managing editor, Joe Toohey. Joe, I guess I know how you're doing. Let's just kind of get into things here. Where do you want to start after what was an eventful weekend?
There was a football game?
Yeah,
Oh,
I heard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where do you
So
want to start with this thing? We can go. We don't really have a schedule of things to hit here because there's just so much. It can go in any direction, so that's kind of how we're going to handle this. So where do you want to start?
okay, so I have a burning question for you,
Yeah.
which is you were at the game. Did you stay for the final play?
Yes, I was. Well, for one, I was there. For one, I wouldn't have left. I always hate leaving games early. Even when my family and I went down to Alabama, or I went down to Florida for the Capital One Bowl against Alabama. My family wanted to leave after I think at halftime or third quarter, and because we had to drive all the way back to Michigan, and we did, and I hated it. Even though MSU was getting blown out, just like I hate leaving games early. So no, I wouldn't have left it early. But also, I was with a friend of mine, and who was a Michigan fan, and I couldn't just leave him because I would have had no clue how to get back in contact with him and get back to his place. So no, I did not leave, but a number did. I'm assuming you did not.
Yeah, I did not either because I'm a hopeless sap and figured that something crazy might happen.
Yeah, I was in the near end zone where the final play happened, and so just a couple rows down from the entranceway. So I saw a lot of fans on their way out. Not much of any taunting from Michigan fans. I'll say just generally a good amount left. And it's gonna be very curious to see what those. I haven't seen any reporters tracking any of those people down for any comments, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of 20 years from now, a lot of MSU fans saying they were at the game who maybe were and left, but mostly were not there. And curious how much that ticket stub would go for sale. But yeah, no, I didn't leave. I didn't. I mean, I had thought the game was over, certainly, but no, I didn't leave.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, actually, who said that he did leave, only found out about the ending after talking to somebody on the phone.
Oh, so you do know someone who left?
Yes.
Oh, when did they leave at 4th and 19?
Yeah, they left. So yeah, after that play, they got up and left.
I imagine they were sitting close to the entrance because otherwise it can take a while to get out of that stadium.
Yeah, I guess I didn't ask about the sort of logistics of leaving the game quickly, but the other thing is I would kind of figure that you would hear some of the hysteria that was going on there, right? I mean, there's some...
Unless he really beat the traffic in those 5 minutes and got out of town.
Yeah, I can't imagine that that's true. So, yeah, I mean, I guess there was more time in between the fourth down play and the punt than I thought there was, though, because there were 3 plays, there were 2 timeouts.
Right,
it was between those 3 plays,
I'd guess 5 minutes of real time.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I guess theoretically you could probably have gotten pretty far away from the stadium, or at least out of the stadium completely by the time the play actually happened.
I mean, with it being maybe with it being a road stadium, you don't get the huge collective roar. And then they did play the victors at the end, so maybe you hear that coming out of the stadium. I don't know. I mean, I guess I buy it. But you said he found out on the phone?
Yeah, he was talking to his brother on the phone.
Like how much later? Like how long after it happened?
Like I think not long after it happened, like a few minutes, but it was too late by then, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I didn't even know. So this play happens, right? So I went to the game with my brother, and we're sitting in the end zone opposite of where the touchdown happened. So I had just accepted the loss, right? I mean, you're sort of rationalizing things in your head as a fan as this punt is about to get away. And so, yeah, I mean, the other thing about that play that was interesting was that I saw Blake O'Neill drop the punt, and I saw somehow one of our players get the ball. I didn't know it was Jalen Watts Jackson at the time.
I didn't know it was Jalen Watts Jackson until I was in the car on the way back. My phone died. Someone else was on their phone and said he broke his hip. Jalen Watts Jackson. I was like, oh, I had no idea who it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really know. There's just so much happening all at once. But I do know that during the play, I didn't realize that there were still Michigan players that could have stopped the touchdown. Like
right.
I
didn't think that
the
live
jailbreak.
Either. Right.
I saw the jailbreak of the ball, and I just started jumping up and down. So I don't know. Like, I mean, I kind of. It was just kind of hard to see.
Were you thinking about? I mean, I didn't think about him getting in the end zone until he did, because I saw the scrum. I couldn't tell if he lost the ball or if he had kicked the ball, but I just remember MSU having it and then just like a pile of people moving forward, and I figured someone's going to like trip and fall or something, and they keep going. I remember glancing up at the clock and seeing 2 seconds. I was like, whoa, this is it. And then I see him get into the end zone. And I wasn't 100% sure that he had crossed the goal line either. I was wondering if maybe a knee was down, but then the ref was right there. With the way everybody reacted, I figured it was pretty obvious. And there was it was such a, I mean, it was such a strange energy in that crowd, because the MSU fans were just as much disbelief as the Michigan fans. Like, I didn't see any MSU fans taunting Michigan fans afterward. It was just like mostly a shocking mood and a celebratory mood from them, obviously. But because I don't think anybody could comprehend what happened. It took me, I mean, even a while after, my buddy and his dad, they didn't say almost a word the rest of the night. But as we were in the car, as we were kind of waiting, and I was just like waiting for things to like snap and them to talk about how it was a good win for Michigan and they're kind of back on track. Because actually the night prior, I had a dream about the game. Well, I had a dream that I had a dream about the game. It's kind of Inception-y. I do it sometimes. It's weird. But I had dreamt that Michigan had like faked a field goal and threw to a wide open guy, but the throw was short or something. And then I had dreamt that I woke up and was telling my buddy about the dream. And then I woke up from that. So that's what happened. So I was still, throughout the day, I had kind of had that in the back of my head. So afterward, I was still not 100% sure that it happened for real. Like, I've had when I played hockey in high school, we won a championship on an overtime goal. And it was like a surreal, like, out-of-body feeling when it happens. And this was one of those where, you didn't know it was real. Like, it was so improbable. Even for a while after the game, I wasn't 100% sure that it happened until I got back and watched the highlight on my computer. That's when it kind of put into context. You kind of talked about your reaction, but what did you were over on the MSU section, I know. So yeah. What was it like over there?
Yeah, I mean, so where I was at was probably 10, 15 rows in front of where they put like the MSU students. I was not in the corner. So like I would say that
up at the top, not quite up at the top, but yeah.
Kind of like two to three rows in front of me, 2 to 3 rows behind me. I think my brother and I, and then a random woman that was a couple seats down from us, were the only 3 Michigan State fans. And the other thing that was funny about the whole game was just the number of reviews that happened was ridiculous. I mean, it was at least 7 reviews. So my brother and I were kind of trolling in general, just like saying goofy things in the stands. So basically after every play that was interesting in any way, we would yell, review it. And
there were a lot of Michigan fans near me who said the same thing. I think that was frustrating for everybody. Yeah,
I mean, I think like we didn't have any issue. Like my brother and I were very tongue-in-cheek about basically everything that was going on. But so we're jumping up and down yelling, review it, and just kind of, I mean, I didn't know. And you
on the final play you're talking?
Yeah, exactly, because it just seemed like they were, after all of the reviews for everything, that they'd review that one. But we didn't even get, like, in the stadium, I didn't, just thinking about it now, we didn't get a replay of that play at all in the stadium.
No.
Like, they just went, they just
They
pretty much directly.
They didn't even have it up on the scoreboard for very long. I know.
Right.
Because no, the old scoreboard, it had the analog numbers, but yeah, there aren't a lot of photos of that scoreboard. I actually found one, but there are not a lot of.
KJ got one.
Okay, a friend had one, but there were not a lot of photos of the scoreboard either.
Yeah, and then there was just like, I don't know how much of this there was around you. Probably different because you went with a Michigan fan, but like just hugging random strangers that are in the section, and just kind of standing there like, what just happened here? Like, did that really just happen, or like, am I imagining things? Like, but with everybody going nuts for as long as they did, it was incredibly wild. There was just like, I feel like Michigan fans took a second to think like, are they going to review this? Like, is there anything else that's going to happen after this play, or is this really over? And then streamed out. But yeah, that was wild. And like, I didn't know how long to stay either, right? Because obviously there's the pile up in the end zone on top of Watts Jackson, and so I didn't realize that he was injured at the time.
I did pretty quickly because there was the kind of everybody backed off around when everyone was standing around him and it was clear I knew someone was hurt. I didn't know who it was or if they had scored. I didn't know anything. You couldn't tell in the stadium, but yeah. So I didn't really know. So yeah, it was just Michigan fans didn't even get up and leave right away, because this wasn't a play where like you're on the edge of your seat, which way is it going to go. You're just accepting that it's over and you're just waiting for it to finish, and then it happens, and everybody was just in shock. Even like I say, even the Michigan fans didn't leave right away. I've never seen a stadium go deader quicker than that, and walking out of the stadium afterward, just dead silent everywhere. Even the MSU fans, there wasn't like go green, go white chants. It was just like squealing.
Yeah, laughing. I mean, I was laughing walking back. So where I live is not very far away from the stadium, and so walking back from the game, I mean, I just couldn't help myself but laugh. Like, just, I mean, it's just such a goofy play. I mean, that was the only like reaction I could have was just laughing. Like, so the other thing that was striking to me about the whole thing was, so talking to anybody like after the game ended or describe, interactions on the street, like there was no, I mean, it was just obvious what you were talking about. Like, you didn't have to have any intro with like, did you see that play or anything? It was like, just, it was assumed that whatever it was that you were talking about was that play, which was very interesting.
I remember as I was driving out, you could when you got toward maybe the drunken fans who didn't go to the game and who were maybe less shocked and were doing the taunts, and I said to my friend's brother, I said, there's going to be a lot of fights tonight. And based on the police reports that I saw, between fights and burning couches, not surprised it went down that route. So let's, since the last couple of days has been a debate, where does this play rank all time, and whether memorable plays, greatest plays, unusual plays, whatever you want to say it. I would just go with most improbable plays. I put it in college football history. I put it. I thought about this. I think I put it at number one because it was different than the kick six Auburn Alabama, because that game Alabama's kicking for the win, but it's a 57-yarder. The odds of making it are low, and if he misses it, you're going to overtime. He catches the thing, returns for a touchdown. It's crazy, but we've seen that happen before. Cal Stanford. What made that most memorable is the band was on the field. The call, it's tremendous. But we've seen laterals for touchdowns. We have never seen a game end like this before, and especially flipping a loss to a win, a sure loss to a win. It wasn't even a punt, block where it's an easy return for a touchdown. It was fumbled, ball gets hit right to a guy, he's got to race it in. Like, a lot of things had to happen on the play more than just dropping the thing. I put it as the most improbable, incredible, greatest play in college football history. Maybe it's recency bias. I know a lot of people think that, but I've just never seen anything like that before, and I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again.
Yeah, I agree. From a plus, there's so much about it that's so collegey in and of itself, right? I mean, it's a big rivalry as well. It's the other storylines outside of the play itself that are so big to us, at least this season, are, I mean, those will probably fade over time, but yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think it's just so unusual, so unexpected. And there are a number of plays on that list that are just Hail Mary plays, right?
Right.
Which are impressive and dramatic. And
I think of all the Hail Marys, you got the LSU, the tipped one. That one's pretty crazy. I think the Cordell Stewart one doesn't get enough love because of how damn far he threw that ball.
Right.
That was an unbelievable throw.
Yeah.
To even get the ball there. The only play in my mind that it's comparable to all of football is the miracle at the Meadowlands. The Giants could run out the clock, but they fumbled the ball, and Herm Edwards picks it up and goes in for a touchdown to win the game for the Eagles. That's about the only thing I can compare it to, but I don't even know if that was the final play of the game. I was looking at it earlier today. I don't know if it was the final play of the game or not, but that's about where you have the game in hand and it's done, and it's over, and for it to change like that, just crazy. What did you think of the calls by the radio, by the TV? What did you think of those?
Well, I liked the Sean McDonough cracking of the voice. That was pretty good. That was impressive. I would say I don't know, other than the McDonough voice cracking, I felt like they were all they were good, but it's hard. That play is so hard to call because there's it's so inexplicable. I mean, today was the first day where I feel like I got a good grasp on exactly how that ball popped out, which came from the Sports Science clip, the ESPN Sports Science, where they show how Blake O'Neal's got the ball after he drops it, right? He goes to pick it up and he tries to turn, and he drops, with his right hand, he drops the ball a fraction of a second after he drops it with his right hand to try to kick it. He gets hit from the right side by Grayson Miller hard enough that his arm flops into the ball and hits the ball out.
18. Sports Science said it went 18 yards.
It was 18 feet. So it's
feet.
So it goes 6 yards, right?
To get into Jalen Watts Jackson's hands,
who is already running in that direction. I mean,
basically, yeah. Like I said, it's a lot more than bumbling the snap. A whole hell of a lot of things had to happen for that. And D'Antonio made a point to credit Jermaine Edmondson for blocking downfield because he's the only one of that group who did. There were like 5 people with him, and none of them blocked. They were all just running, and only Edmondson decided to get out in front and make a block because Jake Butt almost caught up and tackled him at the end. That's why he kind of fell into the end zone. So
yeah, I mean, so Edmondson, and I don't know who Edmondson was blocking, but that guy made a smart play. The Michigan player who Edmondson was blocking made a smart play in just trying to hold Edmondson up and allow other players to get there.
Yeah, and he almost ran. I mean, given the situation, almost ran Watts Jackson, ran him toward the sideline, and then made him cut back in too to kind of do what he could.
Yeah. So those guys.
And as I look back, I can't believe he didn't trip over somebody's feet. There were so many. You see it so often. Just get tangled up in feet, and you go down.
And Butt comes in with his right arm and rips down pretty hard, especially because Watts Jackson begins to take the ball and reach towards the end zone. So I was, in retrospect, I mean, during when that play happened, I had no idea. I just assumed he was in the end zone. It wasn't even close. But on further inspection, watching Butt rip down with his right arm, I mean, the ball you could have had a Calvin Johnson versus the Seahawks style, ball getting batted out of Watts Jackson's hands with no time on the clock.
Right.
Which is basically the only way that play could have gotten crazier is if Watts Jackson fumbles the ball at the goal line. Yeah, I mean, the play itself is so improbable and that, yeah, like I just now figured out like what actually occurred during that play.
And yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, and I know some people said after the game, but I'm pretty sure had he gone down inside the 5, there would have been a second left. However, does the clock accidentally run out? Do they review? Whole lot of a review in that situation would have been something, because that would have presumably given him. You think it's tackled, clock runs out. Michigan, you think you win. Maybe they decide to go review it, and they decide that there's a second left, and MSU lines up for a field goal. That review would have been something. And actually, thinking about it, with the Hail Mary against Wisconsin, thinking back how that was decided on a review, but the difference there was he was ruled short. They had ruled not in favor of the home team. So after all the reviews in that game, that might have been a full-scale ride if they had reviewed that and given MSU a chance to kick it. But even so, with the way MSU has been kicking, I don't know if you feel all that great about a 18-yard field goal from a really tough angle too. So that, I mean, to be able to get into the end zone and to have the mind to get in there was pretty incredible. And that's why I keep saying it took a lot more than just a ball popping up or a bobbled snap for that to happen. A lot of things had to happen for that play.
Yeah, I mean, so many different ways that could have gone differently. Absolutely. I mean, so the kicking game could be a decent segue into actually talking about the game.
Well, here's what I'll say first. Before we get into the game, I know a lot of MSU fans got upset by some things written over at MGoBlog, as one does. And most notably, Brian wrote, where is it? Okay, Brian writes, I know you're upset about this, which is why I wanted to bring it up. But for
I'm going to mute myself so I don't swear while you're reading it.
Brian, very good writer, kind of the standard bearer, I think, for a lot of sports blogs. Very good writer, but when it comes to MSU, he just can't help himself, I guess. I don't know. He takes cheap shots against MSU. I don't think happen with other teams he writes, and maybe that's because of the proximity of the rivalry, which is why I think it's a different rivalry than most. But Brian writes, so that sucks. It sucks that happened. It sucks that the kind of trash program that would run all the way across the field to taunt the Michigan student section after being handed a gift gets to feel like they earned something this morning. They're planning on nicknaming it as if they earned something. That's why Michigan State will be always be Michigan State. That's why Little Brother stuck, because it's the truest thing ever said about the attitude of that program. But I've seen worse. I felt worse. I have a big old callus. It's clear the direction this is going, and it's not a loss to Rutgers. The Juggalos will get theirs as soon as Harbaugh flips the QB matchup. That's the undercurrent of their relief. They're already celebrating like underdogs who fluked it out. See you next year. So the first thing the only thing that really confused, like I understand being upset and all that. The only thing that confused me on that was talking about MSU players like running over to taunt the student section, like that was the plan. Like it wasn't to, like the touchdown didn't just happen right in front of them, and that the team didn't just run straight to where the guy who scored the touchdown was. Like that's why everybody ran over there. That that was the only thing that stuck out. Like what? Like it was very clear that's what they were doing. Yeah, a couple of MSU players taunted the students, but if you look at the raw video right there, like it's not like they all turn around and go taunt students and don't even celebrate. It's very clear that they're running into a pile to celebrate with Jalen Watts Jackson. And what I actually thought about when I read that was back in 2007, after Chad Henne throws what would be the game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter there, he and other Michigan players, it was in the same end zone of the student section, but the opposite corner. After the touchdown, they come running by and taunting the student section on the way to the bench. So, whatever. I don't got no problem with anybody taunting students. It's part of the rivalry. It's part of it's fun. And so I just thought that specific jab just didn't make any real sense to me. So that was my only real thing. I know days after Michigan State are always very annoying on the internet. But Joe, you were very upset about this and expressed as much on the internet. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably my managing of the TOC Twitter account is a little more tongue-in-cheek than sometimes it probably comes off as. But so, yeah, I mean, your point there about the taunting of the student section, first, yeah, not really being taunting because that's where the touchdown happened, but also not being a big deal because it's a rivalry.
Also, the fact that some players immediately ran straight to the family section instead of the pile where the touchdown was actually kind of confused me. I was like, wait, why did they not go celebrate with their teammates? Why did they go celebrate with their family? It just seemed odd to me because I figured the whole team would head over there. So that's how much the idea of it being a taunting thing was confusing to me.
Yeah, so that's part of it. The other part that was just unnecessary was to call MSU a trash program, because that's, first of all, not true in any respect, really. I think D'Antonio's handled himself with class in general, and clearly the team, in terms of quality, has been excellent since at least 2010, if not before. So, I mean, that part bothered me too, because it was just an attack that was unnecessary. And then the other thing is this continued use of juggalo to describe MSU fans, right?
Yeah, I thought the only college community really embraced that too. So I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how it's an insult. So.
So it's goofy because there's no background really. So there's after the 2010 win,
correct,
MSU had against U of M in Ann Arbor. Brian for MGoBlog wrote another article that was, pretty upset and basically said that MSU fans were into horrorcore, like the Insane Clown Posse stuff, which if you go back and read that article, it is relatively nonsensical anyways. They don't understand
a lot of the, like I said, when it comes to MSU, it kind of just goes in that direction for some reason.
I don't know if he's just trying to say that we're clowns. I don't get it, but in any case, none of that.
I think it's a white trash kind of thing. But KJ wrote a really good response to that year. I think it's called The Rejoindering. So if you just Google The Rejoindering, the only colors, you'll probably find it. I just remember KJ had a good response after that.
Yeah. So the other funny thing about all of this was...
That's where journalist comes from, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
People listening.
So the other funny thing that was, I went back and looked at some of his post-game sort of columns after the Michigan State games in the past, and in 2013, he sort of lambasted anybody who, in his words, deployed the little brother rhetoric, and then specifically used that rhetoric in this column. And then the other thing was, after Joe Bolden's tent spike incident last year, he made a comment about sportsmanship in this rivalry, which is that sportsmanship in this rivalry, or unsportsmanlike conduct in this rivalry, basically amounts to punching people, and anything else is not unsportsmanlike. So to suggest that the taunting was unsportsmanlike, or that any of that was sort of unnecessary was just sort of hypocritical to begin with anyways. But then that doesn't even begin to talk about the joke of an article that they wrote about the officiating in the game, right? So I don't know if you saw that. But.
Yeah, I saw it today. We're obviously not going to spend a whole ton of time talking about another website or anything, but we write on the internet. That's kind of what internet people do. They talk about each other. So I could tell Joe was very upset about this. I wanted to give you a forum to kind of put some context to your thoughts. Seth, who another very good writer over there, wrote a whole post breaking down something like 17 different officiating incidents and whatnot, and actually complimented me at the beginning of the piece by saying I was reasonable. So I appreciate that. But the whole piece in general, we can kind of talk about this as we move into talk about the game. In almost any situation, to blame officials anywhere looks bad. It looks bad when fans do it. It looks bad when coaches do it. It looks bad when players do it, especially when the game was literally decided on a play that had nothing to do with any sort of officiating, and it wouldn't even be a conversation if the final result didn't happen. But just a strange post, but I think one I'm sure a lot of readers over there would seem to enjoy, and it's kind of what people do.
Yeah, and I mean, I will agree with the idea that the officials were generally poor in this game.
No doubt.
So I just don't think that the attempt at quantifying the terribleness was very effective. And I also think that there were some bad calls that went against MSU as well. So it's not like it was entirely there were definitely some bad calls that went against U of M. I won't deny that, but
no, I think the targeting call for one sticks out as a very poor call. I could have understood maybe an unnecessary roughness or something, but to uphold that through targeting just really seems against the spirit of the rule.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it was a late hit. I mean, I don't buy that Bolden was blocked into Cook. He pretty clearly went down onto Cook specifically, and I mean, I don't know if he really led with his head, but there was definitely helmet contact. Now, yeah, I agree with you. I think that basically the targeting call was supposed to stop players from, using their helmet as a weapon. And I don't think that that's what Bolden was doing in that situation. I think it was probably a 15-yard penalty, but I agree. I don't think that Bolden should have been ejected for it. Not that I think Bolden's ejection made a huge difference in the game anyways, because I thought that Gedeon for Michigan played pretty well anyways.
Right, and it's not like, it's they shut down MSU's running game. Anything MSU did was in a passing attack that had nothing to do with the linebackers. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, was there anything else you wanted to say about Seth or Brian's articles?
I would just say, I mean,
you're a lot calmer now than you were on Twitter, and I think that's a good thing about this podcast, is that it gives you time to cool down and put your full thoughts in more than 140 characters.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think that's one reason the podcast is good. But I would say that ultimately the reason I think I was mostly upset is because I have really high standards for those guys. I really respect the writing that they do, and I sort of aspire to be as good as they are in some respects. So it's just disappointing to read stuff like that, and that's all. I guess that's all.
Right, like I said, the writing is tremendous. It's just whenever it comes to MSU, it just gets nasty and off character, and but that's why I always say I think this rivalry, you can argue, you don't need to argue it's bigger than Ohio State. It's just different because you're dealing with these people on a constant basis from all, if you live in the state, or just from all walks of life, and for Michigan to lose 7 of 8, to lose the 7th on such an incredible, unfortunate, unlucky play, that would hurt. That would hurt anybody. So let's. Okay, I some people got upset at me over the weekend because I believed that MSU did not, well, however you want to phrase it, deserve to win the game, better team, whatever. I thought on the day, the better team overall was Michigan. MSU was better, the better offensive team between the two. MSU was the better defensive team between the two. But the special teams disparity was so incredibly big that it single-handedly had cost MSU the game. I had said every time a special team, I talked to my buddy, I said special teams are going to be just huge in this game. Every time something happened, I'd say to them, special teams, whether it's a poor kickoff coverage, whether it's a bad punt, whether it's a fake punt that doesn't work, whether it's bad punt return coverage, whatever it was, whether it's Michigan making field goals and MSU not feeling comfortable enough to kick field goals, they were destroyed in every facet of special teams in that game. The field position was heavily in favor of Michigan because MSU could not do anything with its special teams. But they made the special teams play to win the game. I'm not saying, I mean, obviously I'm not saying they shouldn't have won because they made the play at the end. But I think anybody would say that final play was a bit fortuitous. The punter just dropped the ball, and then a crazy chain of events happened, as we just talked about. But if Michigan gets that punt off, goes down, clock runs out, I don't think we hear anybody saying MSU was the better team, they should have won that game, because they didn't lead until there were 0 seconds on the clock, and that's not just bad luck. That's incredibly bad special teams play, putting your offense and defense behind the ball all day. And while they put up better yards, they were in position to have to put up better yards because Michigan was able to get yards in a lot of other different ways. You seem to disagree with that notion.
Yeah, so I guess ultimately the larger point I'll make here is just that deserving to win is a weird notion, I guess.
Right. That's why, right. And I can understand if people got. Michigan was in position to win that game because they put themselves in position to win that game, is what I'll say. Though I don't think MSU was unlucky to be in a position where they were about to lose that game.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you could argue that up until that point, Michigan had gotten a little bit lucky in terms of, the fact that they made all 3 of their field goals. I mean, a lot of that is skill as well, but there are a few things in there that could have gone differently as well in MSU's favor that could have changed the outcome of the game itself anyways. But deserving to win to me means that you played a competitive enough game where luck became a factor, right? So I think a lot of different teams deserve to win a lot of different games.
Sure.
You could make an argument that, and this is probably going to be more controversial, but you can make an argument that in the Air Force game, that Air Force played well enough to win against MSU, if not for a couple crazy turnovers. I mean, that RJ Williamson touchdown.
And we said as much. I mean, like 5 turnovers in MSU's territory, plus some turnovers on downs.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I guess I mean. It's not like MSU got their asses handed to them for 4 quarters and then pulled one out because of some miracle play. It was a competitive game in which, had a couple bounces gone differently, MSU would not have needed to be in that situation. Now, yeah, it required the luck to happen. There was a little bit of luck making during that play as well. But the funny thing about some of the rhetoric is like, you guys weren't good. You were lucky to get the game gifted to you like that, in which case I would argue that, does that mean that Michigan's special teams play on that play was so bad that it cost them the game? I mean, yes, it was fortuitous, but they still screwed up the play in general, right?
Right. I'm not saying MSU wasn't competitive, wasn't in that game. Okay, I got a question for you. So the football study hall charts on this game finished with projected scoring margin based on the stats: Michigan State by 17.7 points. However, I don't see much. I don't understand it as well as you do. I don't see much special teams information when it comes to these numbers, whether it's stats on running downs, passing downs, line yards, sack rates, stuff like that. Third down, S&P, first down, second down, third down. I don't know if you know or not, but how does that take special teams into account much?
To some degree, yes. So that's one thing that's difficult with the S&P box scores specifically, is that special teams probably are slightly underrepresented in those box scores because it's kind of difficult from an S&P perspective to quantify special teams play. So I think, and the way I believe that Connolly ends up doing those projections, for the one that I think you're talking about, MSU, the projected margin was MSU winning by 17.7 points or something. And I think the way that works is that it's a regression analysis where it's like, there's X, Y, and Z variables, and, given a game in which one team had an S&P of this and field position of this and finished drives this way, what would normally be the scoring margin in a game like that. So there's randomness involved in, specifically turnovers is the largest area in which there's randomness, but finishing drives to some extent is a relatively random thing as well, for various reasons. And so I think that's another thing where, Michigan had a pretty large advantage in terms of finishing drives because of field goals, and also because they just had fewer opportunities inside of MSU's 40. So I think that's why that S&P model ends up spitting out the 17.7 margin, is specifically because I think special teams are a little underrepresented, and it's trying to account for some randomness both in turnovers and in finishing drives.
Yeah, because when I look, I mean, like I said, I think MSU's offense was better than Michigan's offense. I think MSU's defense was better than Michigan State's defense was better than Michigan's defense. But when you look at stuff like the start and field position, Michigan had 4 drives start in MSU territory, while MSU had 1 drive start past its own 32, not counting the fumble at the end. They started at their own 2, they started at their own 8, they started at their own 4, and a lot of those were because of some great punts by Blake O'Neill. And the special teams play was just so heavily in favor of them. So, I mean, there's a reason MSU never led in that game, and it's because they were constantly put behind the 8 ball, and they had to drive the field and then get into a position where they don't trust their kicker and have to go for it on 4th down. And it possibly cost them 3 points a couple times. Like, that's how much the special teams killed them in this game.
Yeah, and part of the unluckiness is that I think where drives stalled ended up being in no man's land, right?
A little bit, but I don't. Some of those I don't remember what all the down and distances were, but there were some positions where I think with Michigan's kicker they would have attempted it.
Right. Well, or even they've attempted those length of field goals with Geiger in the past, and there's a little more confidence in him. But so there was the one that was killer to me and was just during the game as the game went along really bothered me was it was the second drive of the game, and MSU got the ball on their own 2 after the 80-yard punt by Blake O'Neill, and they drove the ball down the field. It was a 16-play, 70-yard drive that ate up like 8 minutes of time of possession and netted 0 points because they went for it on 4th and 8 from the 28 instead of attempting the field goal, which I think was the right move. um, sort of the analytics calculators about whether or not you should go for it show that, if you had an NFL kicker, you probably kicked a field goal, but it's close. And when you don't have an NFL kicker, I think it becomes the right call. And I also liked the aggressiveness just in general. But yeah, that's the thing that was especially interesting to me, though, is that it distorted the game. Like the special teams play distorted the game in a lot of crazy ways.
It was unbelievable. It was single-handedly. I like when after 4th and 19, I said to my friend, "The special teams cost MSU this game." They if you get average special teams, you probably win that. But that's why I say Izzo said it too. Like, if you just look at the stats, MSU dominated. Well, yeah, if you look at the box score offensive stats, but that's not how the whole there's 3 facets to this game, and this game, as much as any other, should have shown you just how important special teams is when it comes to the game of football.
So there are 2 interesting stats that are one that I use in the Football 5 Factors a lot, which is percentage of available yards gained, which I like a lot better than total yardage stats, because I think it makes a lot more sense. It accounts for differences in drives, right? Where, you've got like against Air Force, R.J. Williamson's touchdown return ends up basically costing MSU offensive yards because it's a touchdown return. MSU doesn't get a drive with which to move the ball. So those stats were pretty encouraging for MSU. MSU had a major advantage in terms of percentage of available yards gained because they managed to drive the ball down more often. Quite often, and I forget exactly the number, but there were a lot of Michigan 3-and-outs. So that was one thing. The second thing is Brian Fremo, who does the available yards gained stat, but he's the guy who does FEI, which is a portion of F+. So what he does is he does splits within the game. So basically, offensive points added, defensive points added, special teams points added. So the splits for this game were specifically really interesting. So the offense for MSU added 0.6 points worth of value, which is by far the lowest of the year. The next lowest was against Purdue, where it was 5.8. The defense added 11.5 points of value towards the spread, basically, which is by far the best outing of the year. The second best was against Air Force. And special teams cost MSU 8.1 points of value within the spread, even including the final play, right?
So, man. Oh, boy. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That might be – what I should do is I should check and see that's got to be one of the absolute worst special teams games all year. It's got to be pretty close.
Right. I mean, they didn't
6 points back too.
The only good thing I'll say about special teams is that they did return 2 punts for 4 yards, which tripled the number of punt returns they had on the year. They had 1 punt return for 1 yard coming into the year. So they at least, I don't know if O'Neal probably outkicked. I mean, probably O'Neal outkicked his coverage, but R.J. Shelton did return 2 punts for very minimal gains. And actually, I was putting together a stats post for Coaching Search today. MSU's punt return team has 5 punt return yards on the year, and they also have 38 fumble return yards. So they're a lot better at the fumble returning than they are the punt returning.
Yeah, too bad you can't at this point have Jalen Watts-Jackson running back punts.
I mean, they're number 100. They're 100. They're averaging opponents to pick up 16 yards a punt, which is just huge considering how they're not kicking the ball very far. Especially with. So let's talk about the punter real quick. So Tyler O'Connor is apparently your punter. Your backup quarterback is apparently your punter because Mark D'Antonio doesn't trust the former top-rated punter recruit from 2 years ago to punt in a difficult environment such as that. And he might not be wrong because Hartberger had 1 punt that went for 33 yards, was a line drive, returned 16 yards by Peppers that put Michigan at the MSU's 28-yard line to start a drive. So, and O'Connor wasn't even that bad. He averaged 38 yards a punt. But the problem is you're just kind of hoping he hits it because his long was a 46-yarder that I'm pretty sure was the one that went way out the back of the end zone when they wanted to pin him deep. The one time he actually got a hold of one was when they didn't want him to. And D'Antonio looked kind of upset about that based on the broadcast, which, like, how you going to be upset about it? He's not a punter. He's a quarterback. He can punt, sure, but you can't ask a quarterback to pin a ball inside the 20. You're just lucky if he doesn't completely shank it. And maybe they were banking on that at that time. So maybe you see Hartbarger against Indiana in a more friendly home environment. And he's only a redshirt freshman. And when D'Antonio explained why he was doing that, it kind of reminded me of Little Giants because when he says why he did the play, he said, it was an inexperienced kicker. He didn't want the new starter, Dan Conroy, to have to kick such a pressure kick. So that's kind of the reasoning he gave for Hartbarger. He doesn't really trust him to punt in this thing. But at the same time, Hartbarger dropped a snap against Purdue. He was bad against Rutgers, got replaced by O'Connor. So I don't know who's going to be the quarterback next year, but Tyler O'Connor may have two positions to himself, which would be pretty crazy.
So the way that played to me, like what that seemed like to me, the way that O'Connor came in, O'Connor's first punt was against Rutgers. And yes, Hartbarger had a really bad game against Rutgers, but so it seemed almost scripted to me in that O'Connor comes in against Rutgers, like they put that on film.
That's what I thought. I did think about that.
And then O'Connor is the punter, and they have him actually punt a couple times, and then they get into a situation where they want to run the fake, and they run the fake. The fake doesn't work, and then on the next punt, Hartbarger's in, and I go, oh, okay, so that's why they did all of that, right? Is that like they figure O'Connor's a good enough punter where the drop off from Hartbarger to O'Connor isn't significant enough where you need it, where what you gain from the opponent being concerned about returns and what you might be able to gain in terms of fakes is enough to make that drop off worth it, because ultimately I think Hartbarger hasn't been terrible. I mean, he had a bad game against Rutgers, yeah, but like
and the fumble punt against, as we know, a punter fumbling a snap can be a pretty bad deal. And what's funny about that fake is that I said to my buddy every time I was pointing out special teams, right before that play, I go, they've got to have a fake out of this. They got to have a pass play out of this. They have to. And right as I said that, well, there it is. And I think it was Medeiros. He was open for like a split second, I think, from my vantage point. But with O'Connor lying something like 15-plus yards off the line of scrimmage because he's lined up at punter, that's a really difficult throw. It's likely a pass breakup. I don't think it was a wrong decision for O'Connor to turn and run. But if O'Connor's really your guy moving forward, I think that opens you up to all kinds of fakes, possibilities you can do, and that's not a bad thing. Maybe D'Antonio said maybe teams will come after us more, but I actually think it'll be the opposite. You would think that you'll have teams playing a lot more punt safe because they want to watch for it. So that could be maybe an unintended benefit of having your backup quarterback as your punter.
Yeah, and the good news about all of this is that I think if you're going to have a major problem, right, and you had to pick one of the three phases of the game to have a major problem, I think you'd pick special teams, because it seems like it's the most it seems like one thing that is easier to manage from a coaching perspective, and they started doing it. The kickoffs became squibs. There was the one where I thought it was recovered by MSU.
Yeah, I had actually, before that too, I said MSU needs to just start squibbing it every time. You can't afford to kick off to the 5 and let Peppers get a return. It's just a waste of time.
Well, and I think the underrated strategy in that situation is the onside kick, because
right, I was wondering that too.
If you can't kick it through the end zone and your kick coverage is bad, why not give yourself an opportunity to recover the ball? I mean, the additional value of getting a possession in that situation is huge, where if it's what, 20 yards worth of field position, which is not meaningless, but the value of the possession is significantly higher. So I kind of expected that to get to happen. And I thought, considering how bad some of those things were, I thought that even though the problems were huge, they were minimized to some extent. There was no punt return touchdown. There was no kick return touchdown. I thought, yeah, the fake was bad. But I also wonder how much of that, I mean, I think in that situation it was a called fake. But I think there could be situations where you give O'Connor a run, pass, punt option where he gets to decide what he wants to do in that situation. I think he probably could have pulled up and punted if he wanted to.
He could, yeah. I got a question. Yeah, I'm sure you probably don't even know. I'm just generally curious of this. Does ineligible man downfield come into play on punts? Right? I mean, it's a passing play, so theoretically you can't have. I mean, it depends. I guess it depends on who counts as your lineman and whatnot, who's eligible and who's not on the play. Because I mean, you can't have the wrong guys running down to field a punt, but then maybe he decides maybe a one or two guys goes out as a receiver. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of options you can do, and I'm sure they're playing with it because they got to do something with how the special teams are playing. And one thing I'll say about that fake, Michigan knew it was a fake. They from what I have heard from some people, the players knew, they recognized it, they adjusted. And that's partly why they made the stop. That was another thing. When I say Michigan was unbelievable on special teams in that game, that was another example. They checked out of what they were going to do and adjusted for the fake, and they were ready for it. So that's another credit to their special teams.
So to answer your original question, yes.
What was my question?
Man downfield is something that is callable.
I would, yeah, because when you're talking about run pass options, I keep thinking about that with all this pop pass stuff and how it's unbelievable how the refs keep missing this stuff all the time. But it's a difficult thing to do. But it's they have options. So we've gone 40 minutes into this podcast without mentioning Connor Cook and Aaron Burbridge and Jordan Lewis, and one hell of a performance from MSU's passing game. Connor Cook, the sideline fade is their go-to play, which is a difficult play to make, but Connor Cook very clearly can make that throw like an NFL quarterback time after time after time. And Aaron Burbridge can go up and make that catch against very good coverage from Jordan Lewis. Quite often. I think he was targeted something like 18, 19 times, finished with 9 catches. Lewis had 6 pass breakups. So it was a pretty big battle between them. And it just came down to two guys of Cook and Burbridge making just some unbelievable plays.
Yeah, and I thought, so one thing that's interesting to me is that it felt like every completion was semi-miracle, right? Like the that's what those plays feel like, because you're just throwing it up and having the guy make a play. But Cook, time after time, was putting it in the exact spot and giving his receiver the best chance to make a play. And it's still a difficult play, but Burbridge made the plays. So in a sense, I mean, it does feel miraculous because you don't typically see college players execute a play like that so frequently. Right, but it also seems like, so, and you see it with the 18 for 39 to some degree, but it seems like it's almost placing unnecessary, and maybe it was necessary, difficulty in this game on the receivers to go up and make plays. But you saw it against Rutgers too. There was that catch by R.J. Shelton at the end that continued a drive that ended up being a game-winning drive. And yeah, so to me that was is an interesting strategy. It seems like in other games, and I don't know if it's just the particular group of receivers that they've got now, or if it's because that relieved some pressure that Michigan might be getting on Connor Cook in this game, where it's just sort of something designed where Cook knew exactly where he was going to be able to throw it, and it doesn't really matter what the coverage is. You just kind of let it go and you let your guy make a play. But.
Yeah, Michigan did play only one high safety for quite a bit, and that's why they were able to attack that so often. But because of how quick Cook got out the ball, they were able to neutralize any sort of safety help and just leave Burbridge and Lewis there. And each guy made plays on both sides too.
Yeah. Oh, I want to, and I did this on Twitter a little earlier too, but my offensive line configurations post ended up being useful at the very end because I guessed the starters for the offensive line in this game. So Jack Allen didn't play, but Conklin and Keeler did, and I kind of figured that they would, involve McGowan somehow because McGowan's been pretty good. So that was my wild card, which was not one of the 12 configurations on the depth chart, which was kind of funny. But
what do you think of the offensive line play? I mean, they had Conklin back, they had Keeler back. Obviously not 100%, Brian Allen at center, but they at least had bodies.
Yeah, when have bodies is positive, you know that the angry MSU offensive lineman hating God is really in effect. I thought they did a decent job, right? I mean, I think they eked out a sack adjusted like 2.4 yards a carry. Let me look that up. 2.9 yards a carry, actually. Well, so I thought that getting to three yards a carry against this particular Michigan defense in this particular game was a win. They nearly got there.
And there's no giant runs to skew that number. I think their longest run might have been Scott's touchdown. Like there was.
So I think it was like 11 yards was the longest run.
So I mean that was general. I mean. At the same time, I mean, 3 yards per carry is good. They weren't tackled for loss very often, but at the same time, there was a point there. I mean, the first couple drives, MSU was going play action rollouts on first down. I was like, whoa, this is you put it in Cook's hands, making them adjust. But then they went back to first down runs every single time, and they were always going for like 1 yard, 2 yards, not much anything. And it's when MSU was behind, it started to feel like they were just wasting plays, and you're like, just put the ball in Connor Cook's hands. And
I felt the opposite a little bit. I thought that near the end of the game they kind of abandoned the run.
Toward the end they did, right. But in that like second and third quarter, it just felt a lot of running for running's sake that just wasn't going anywhere. But at the same time, you got to run to pull up the safety so you can hit those sideline fades, which they did quite a bit. And the fact that that's their go-to play in passing is pretty incredible. But I mean, it's a credit to the players because there was one Burbridge slant, there was a Shelton slant, there was a Josiah Price one. But I'm trying to think of catches that were not sideline fades, and there were not a lot. I mean, there was an RJ Shelton one that was on the sideline. That was a good play. That wasn't really a fade, but. Yeah, Cook's final numbers didn't look very good, but when you watched that game, you came away very, very impressed by him, and I think that's his best games have always been the biggest games. And even though the completion percentage looks bad on that, he played very well in that game, and that's the Cook that MSU needs when you're in a situation missing as so many guys as you are. And he got sacked 3 times, maybe 3 or 4. But he generally did a good job of getting the ball out to avoid the pressure, which is what he had to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the completion percentage had more to do with the quality of Michigan's secondary and also the game plan.
Right. Michigan's D played very well, and that's a very good defense. There's no doubt about that. MSU has a very good Cook to Aaron Burbridge connection that was able to pull out enough to do it. And it's funny, they've gone over 24 points per game and 24 points in 22 straight games now, which is tied for the national lead with Baylor, even if they needed a fumble return touchdown at the end to get there, but they did get there.
Yeah, that's the true important stat there at the end is they were just really needed to get to 24 points because that's a meaningful number.
Yes.
But although, if you could have gotten 24 points in the games in 2012, they would have been undefeated. So there's that. But
that I did not give MSU much of a chance in this game. I incorrectly predicted a 34-17 Michigan win. There were points in the game when Michigan went up 10 and then when they went up 9 where I was thinking, this game is starting to turn into what I expected. Michigan's not quite finishing drives, but MSU's really close to teetering here. But they didn't. And the first time that I thought that they really had a chance to win was after the long pass to Trayvon Pendleton, the fullback, in what was just an unbelievably well-designed play. I've watched that play 10, 20 times since then. I keep losing sight of Pendleton. Like, I watch the play, and I'm like, how is he open? I'm watching the guys here. Even knowing what the play is and knowing where Pendleton is on the snap, I still keep losing him. That's how unbelievable. Like Michigan blew a coverage on it, sure, but like that was just a hell of a play. Confused the hell out of a defense.
And then a great run by Pendleton after the catch.
Right,
I mean,
and he's averaging
what? He's
averaging something like 50 yards of catching as Michigan or something because he had the one 2 years ago on the throwback.
Oh yeah.
But that play, my God, that was just a brilliantly well-designed play.
And it was the perfect time to use it too because they needed it when they were down 23-14.
We talked about is MSU hiding stuff? And I said, I'm not saying they've used the whole playbook, but I don't think I just didn't think that they were being conservative in games in which they were close, like Rutgers. I don't believe they were conservative in that game. I just believe they just didn't play well. But they didn't use the whole playbook. That's a play they obviously had in the bag, and they pulled out the perfect time. And when that happened, and they pulled back to within 2. That was the first time I thought that MSU had a chance to win that game because I picked them to lose. Did you pick them to win or lose?
I did pick them to win. I thought it would be a little bit higher scoring because I thought that there would be a few more possessions.
Right. So did you go? I mean, as the game went on, did you just right from the bat think that MSU had a chance that they were going to win this game? Because I honestly didn't. I went into the game thinking it was. I didn't pay for my ticket. I got it for free. So I was just like, I think they'll lose, but as the game, when they went up 10, I was like, they're right. With the way MSU special teams are playing, like one big return or something could just about put this to like a 17-point game and really get the crowd behind them and go. But MSU held within striking distance long enough until they got the play at the end. But as that game played out, I mean, how'd you go from thinking they were going to win, lose up until the 4th and 19 when we all thought they lost?
Yeah, so when I made my prediction in the last week, right, I would say that it was largely faith-based because, in knowing that this MSU team was a little better than their results had suggested just because of specific game situations and injuries. But, yeah, I mean, I thought from the get-go when I saw the starting safety tandem of Khari Willis and Grayson Miller, both true freshmen with Demetrius Cox and Arjen Colhoun at corner, I thought, oh God, this could be a really long game because to start 2 true freshman safeties in this particular defensive scheme, I mean,
did that burn Grayson Miller's redshirt, or had he played?
No, they had both played. Both guys had played.
I'd seen Willis. I hadn't seen much of Miller.
Yeah, well, Miller played in the final drive against Purdue. So they both had played in the nickel package pretty significantly prior to this game. But, yeah, it was that was scary. However, it looked like the right move. It seemed like both those guys were pretty solid in terms of run support. There were a couple plays on the perimeter specifically where I thought Grayson Miller did a great job in wrapping up guys in space, which I thought was really important. Mm-hmm. And the best thing I can say about Khari Willis is that I didn't notice him, right? So to Miller have, as a safety, right? That's probably a pretty
Miller got beat twice. My prediction for the game was Michigan would hit at least one of their deep balls. I mean, they hit kind of a couple medium deep balls on Miller, but I was very, very unimpressed with Michigan's downfield passing game. I mean, Cheston was open on the 1, and Rudock overthrew him like he has every single time this year.
Well, I thought the defensive line did a good job of getting
pressure. And that helped. The defensive line played like it needed to play and got a heck of a lot of pressure on Rudock. But the fact that you went into a game like this with 2 true freshman safeties and didn't really get burned much was remarkable. And
who, by the
also,
way, are going to continue to be the starting safeties.
also an indictment of Monte Nicholson.
Yeah.
To not, I think he came in on some nickel plays. But,
Yes, he did.
Yikes. I mean, it was a year ago when R.J. Williamson got benched for Monte Nicholson. Now, a year later, Williamson was playing like an all Big Ten player. Now he's hurt, and Nicholson's benched for true freshman. Geez. I thought some of the personnel decisions were really quite an indictment on Nicholson and Hartbarger, who we already talked about. But yeah, at the same time though, they did play well. They did tackle well. There was one play where Peppers was on offense on a 3rd down. I think that there was a swing pass to him, and Khari Willis stayed square with him. He didn't over pursue and he waited because it was 3rd down. He didn't need to, on a swing pass, he didn't need to charge at him and get out of position. He stayed square, let Peppers come into him, caught him, held him up. They got a gang tackle to stop him short. I think they forced a punt or a field goal. That was a play I saw, and I thought I could see Nicholson darting in there full speed ahead, and Peppers just making a little move and leaving Nicholson in dust. So that was a play I did notice, Khari Willis, and it was a good play that he made.
So what I will say, though, is that as the game went along, I gained confidence in that safety tandem just because I thought they played pretty well. Yeah, they weren't perfect, but they were pretty good. Now,
I was surprised. I was very not. If I was a Michigan fan, I would have kind of questioned some of the play calling with how you were not running the ball, to not take some more shots downfield. To just for the sake of testing these true freshmen. I mean,
right.
You're in a position, just go at them, try to rattle them, see what happens. They didn't really do that. I was kind of surprised at a lot of 1st down run, 2nd down run, 3rd down short pass.
I wonder how much the conditions played a factor in that too, because it was pretty windy at times.
It kind of was, but again, just to attack him, just to force him to try to make a play or something like that. I was just kind of surprised that they didn't. I'm not quite sure who calls the plays for him. I think Drevno does the offensive coordinator, but
I think you're right. So the interesting thing too is that on the depth chart for this coming week against Indiana, which is a team that can actually throw the ball, the 2. Willis and Miller are the starting safeties again this week. So
yep, and they are very.
That's going to be a very interesting situation.
And if Nate Sudfeld's healthy, and it appears he is, we'll talk about Indiana in a minute before we wrap up. But I think they're going to be tested a lot more than they were against Jake Rudock. So, was there anything else you wanted to touch on in this game? I mean, there's a whole heck of a lot to say about it. We've been talking about it for about an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to me the number of things that we would consider storylines about this game that end up getting swept under the rug a little bit because of the enormity of the final play there, right? I mean, D'Antonio's 100th win, the fact that Connor Cook is now 30-3 as a quarterback at MSU, the fact that they've now won 33 of their last 36 games. I mean, 7 of 8 against Michigan. All of those things I think are underrated to some extent just because that final play was as ridiculous as it was.
Yeah, I mean, I had. Oh, something else to talk about. The timeout usage in this game was brutal on both sides, and it sort of another situation where it kind of cost MSU the game. So before the 4th and 19, they got to take a timeout because they couldn't get the play in time. And when that play happened, I said that's it. Unless they get a miraculous 4th and 19, I said that's it because they're going to be able to run down the clock to something like 15 seconds because they had to use a timeout earlier on the drive because of a sack. And to not get that play in, I know it's 4th down, and I know maybe call a timeout to make sure you got everything, but honestly, you're in a spot where it might be better to just take the delay of game penalty because you need those timeouts to stop the clock because the odds of getting a 4th and 19 are not going to be much better than getting an odds of 4th and 24 and you need those timeouts to stop the clock or force Michigan to do something else with the ball in offense. And that was bad. And MSU used 2 first-half timeouts when Peppers lined up in the backfield. Michigan had called timeout. I don't remember what for. Then they come out in a new formation. Peppers there. MSU called timeout. Okay, I get it. Obviously you want to make sure you know what you're doing, who's guarding Peppers. They come back in the exact same formation. You call timeout again. What the hell happened? I saw safeties and corners talking to each other. I don't know if they didn't know who had them or what. Maybe it's because you got 2 freshmen there. That was inexcusable. There was another one, I think, at the end of the first quarter where Michigan had to call timeout because Jake Rudock thought the game, the quarter clock would run out for the play clock, but it wasn't going to, so then they had to call a timeout there. Just some really bad timeout management by both teams, and it wouldn't have been talked about much. It hasn't, even if MSU lost, but having to use that timeout for that 4th and 19 was really, really bad.
Yeah, brutal. I mean, so Spartan Dan had a really funny tweet about this later. I think it was yesterday or maybe on Sunday, but so he's the king of late game situations and just incredibly thorough when it comes to analyzing the best situations in which to go for 2 and all these various scenarios. And his tweet had basically said, do literally anything other than take that timeout in that situation. He said that he would have preferred MSU to simply snap the ball and spike it, giving possession back to Michigan right there, rather than take that timeout in that situation. And ultimately, I think I agree with him. Like, if you consider the 2 scenarios, right? If you take the snap and just spike it, there's still, I forget exactly how much time was left, 1:40 something left on the clock with 2 timeouts, which means that you can get the ball back with about a minute left. And yeah, I mean, literally the worst thing to do in that situation was take the timeout, and they did anyways. With the loudness of the crowd and just how big the situation is, I think they ended up, I understand why it happened, but it was still a pretty big mistake. And actually, post-game, D'Antonio said that he was kicking himself for not just sending out the punt team in that 4th and 19 situation because of field position and the fact that he still had 2 timeouts. So, yeah, that was it was pretty interesting. I can't fault him for going for it in that situation just because of how good Cook and Burbridge had been. But yeah, that's another good point. I didn't, that was.
Oh yeah. One of the most improbable wins you'll ever see, a game that will be, or a play that will be replayed until the end of time. A loss that if you're a Michigan fan, I don't know how you can ever get over, and I can't believe we did. I mean, Alabama fans are going to have to hear about the kick 6 forever, and part of it might depend on what MSU does. I mean, if MSU comes out and loses to Indiana and the season goes nowhere, you forget about it. But if MSU goes on to play for a Big Ten, maybe play for a national championship, the legend of this play only grows more. Jalen Watts Jackson is out for a very long time. He literally gave his body to win that game. D'Antonio calls him the man, the legend. He will go down in history as one of those guys. He'll go down even more so than T.J. Duckett catching the pass, Nigeria Carter catching the pass, Larry Caper scoring the touchdown in overtime. Just an unfathomable play that MSU came out on the good side of it. And for all the bad bounces MSU's had go its way in forever, or bad situations, you think about Braylon Edwards in 2004, or the immaculate the play against Notre Dame in, I think it was 1990, where you get the interception bounces off MSU's chest right to a Notre Dame player that I think set up a big score. For that to go MSU's way, a lot of fans probably hadn't felt that before. And MSU is now 17-7 in one-score games since 2010, and 5 of those losses came in 2012. So outside of that, it always seems like MSU gets all the breaks or none of the breaks in a given season. And And this so far has been a season where they're one of those seasons where they're getting all of the breaks. And to be in that stadium, to see that play, to see such a legendary play happen live, I think it's just a special moment for anybody who was there. It'll be something none of us, anyone who ever saw it, will ever forget. And I can't even imagine the people who didn't see it live. I mean, my wife had taken the dog out for a walk after fourth down. A lot of people had changed the channel. I can't even imagine missing that play, because to see that play live is just a feeling that is incredibly hard to replicate, and it's what makes college football so great, because I don't think a play like that happens in the NFL. Although I did mention the miracle at the Meadowlands, but in today's game, with such finely tuned athletes, you don't see necessarily mistakes like that. And what I love about college football is the margin for error, and the fact that bad things can happen and crazy things can happen. And to have that end the way it did was remarkable, and something we'll remember for a long time.
Yeah, my brother and I actually were talking about that. As soon as we left the stadium, we were like, 30 years from now, we'll be, sitting around talking about this game, and the fact that we were there, right? I mean,
right.
It was just really cool.
I'm curious how much ticket stubs would go to sell. Maybe not.
Probably not very expensive right now, because Michigan fans. Actually, I bought tickets on StubHub, and so I printed out my tickets because that was the only way to get them. I'd much prefer like an actual ticket stub.
Yeah, I've got an actual ticket stub because my buddy has season tickets,
which is way better. But on the way out of the stadium, I stumbled upon a ticket stub that was not in my section or row, even close, but I have a ticket stub, so I was pretty.
Well, there you go.
So to me, it was free, at least.
So let's talk about what no one's talking about, and that's Indiana, and that's the old brass spittoon rivalry, and a game that MSU certainly best not overlook, because it's an Indiana team that nearly beat Ohio State with its backup quarterback and backup running back, and it's an Indiana offense that seems to always give MSU fits, and it's going to happen against a defensive backfield that is absolutely still depleted. You could still use injuries as an excuse when it comes to the defensive backfield that has to play two true freshmen, because one of their safeties can't do stuff in Nicholson. What do you think about this matchup? Is this something? On the other hand, so Indiana in their last game, they lose 55-52 to Rutgers, giving up the final 25 points in the game. I think outscored 22-0 in the fourth quarter, something like that. So they're coming off a heartbreak loss of their own. That's for sure. But it's an offense that can score, but it's a defense that can't really stop. So what do you kind of see in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had much time to really devote to previewing Indiana much. I did watch a good chunk of that Indiana-Ohio State game, and so it seems to me like this is a defense that MSU should be able to run the ball against pretty effectively. I'm not sure if Madre London will be playing or not. He's listed, along with Delton Williams, who played a huge role in the Michigan game we didn't even talk about.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't make many plays, but he had a good share of his carries.
He was relatively terrible in pass protection, but I digress. Anyways, so all four of the running backs, London, Scott, Williams, Holmes, are listed as co-starters. So I think we'll see. I think they'll probably give London another week, and then the bye, just because I think the other three are absolutely capable of doing everything that needs to get done in this game. But I think it can be a pretty good game for them. Also, it seems like Conklin and Keeler are back for good. They didn't have any oars next to their names on the offensive line, which is good. It looks like Jack Allen is still questionable a little bit, but I think that MSU should be able to run the ball in this game, which is good. There were a lot of big plays that Ohio State had in the running game. I don't know how much of that was just Ezekiel Elliott or Indiana's defense. I think it's a little of both. From the special teams perspective, Indiana's average in most categories, special teams wise, which means that they'll have a major advantage in that area. And then offensively, yeah, if Sudfeld can go, and yeah, it sounded like he probably would, that they'll be able to pass the ball to some extent. And I'm very interested to see how the safeties cope with that. They said that they're going to take the red shirt off of Tyson Smith for this game, so I suspect that they'll be rotating defensive backs in a little bit in a way that they did not.
Yeah, when they lost Jalen Watts-Jackson, who D'Antonio said was really close to cracking the playing rotation there.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of an underrated part of that play is that yet another hit to defensive secondary.
Yeah, to kind of, for all the talk about injuries, to kind of end that game on an injury is kind of interesting too.
Yeah, appropriate in some way.
But it also says something about Darian Hicks too. It sounds like he's questionable, which sounds
right.
Like if they're going to burn another red shirt, I would imagine he's not going to play.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of defensive back freshmen that can play, which is interesting, and there's some positive things said about them in fall camp, so that'll be interesting to watch as well. And I wonder too, so if Hicks plays, I'm interested to see if they end up moving Cox back to safety or if he's at corner anyways, and what they kind of do with
if Hicks is good, I have to imagine Cox will move to safety, just pure numbers wise. But I mean, unless Grayson Miller and Kari Willis are both playing that good, but Hicks has, I think, in the limited time he's played, I think he's been the best defensive back they've had.
So the other interesting thing is that Mark Myers is still suspended.
Yep.
That was a DUI, I think, correct?
Something
like that, violation of team rules in some sense. So that's been another hit to the secondary depth. So considering the tempo with which Indiana will play and the fact that there are so many freshmen that will be playing, that's obviously, I think, the biggest thing to watch is whether or not Indiana will be able to pass the ball. That and special teams. I mean, special teams seem like an area that should be able to make up ground pretty quickly in just by not being horrible at it. That's another thing that I don't understand is the regression of players who were good last year, right? Like Kevin Cronin, for instance, was one of the best kickoff guys in the Big Ten last year in terms of touchbacks, and now all of a sudden he can't get the ball in the end zone, and I don't understand what could have possibly happened.
Including when he had the wind at his back at Michigan too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that can't be by design, especially considering the return men that Michigan has. So.
Yeah, and I mean Nicholson, Geiger, Cronin. You talk about guys who aren't playing as well as they have in previous years.
Oh, the other name for Indiana I wanted to mention was Jordan Howard is their running back who has been injured.
Is he back yet?
I do not know. So
okay. He was among the nation's leading rushers, transfer from UAB in terms of yards before he got hurt against Ohio State. So I mean, this is an Indiana team that can run the ball. It's not just a pass 50 times a game deal. And like I said, this offense is just always given MSU fits with its short passing game, with its screens. And it'll be interesting to see what mindset MSU comes into this game with. I will say they are 7-1 after the Michigan game under D'Antonio, with the one loss being Ohio State last year, who obviously went on to win the national championship. But in D'Antonio, in his definition of big wins, I think he said they're something like 26-6 after those games. So they've got a good track record, and track record would tell you that. But this is a game I think it'll be maybe a bit more comfortable than fans maybe would want. I get the feeling fans want to come into this game still celebrating the Michigan win, get an easy win, head into the bye week continuing to talk about the Michigan game. But it's a game that I think Indiana will make its fair share of plays in. I'm about to look up the line right here.
It's 16.5. MSU by 16.5.
Yeah, so I mean, when you'd imagine a team like Indiana and a top 10 team like Michigan State, though they did just cover for the first time all year, they're not that much of a favorite in Vegas, and it's a 63.5 over/under, so they expect some points.
Yeah, what could happen here is, again, like MSU got up to 12 possessions, 12 true possessions in this game, which is tied for the most this season for MSU. They also had 12 possessions against Oregon, but every other game has been, 8, 9, 11 possessions, which is a really low number. I mean, 10 was the low last season against Penn State, I believe. So what could end up happening with a hurry-up offense like Indiana, especially if they're scoring a decent amount, is that if MSU's throwing the ball a fair amount too, is just a real jump in the number of possessions during this game, which to me would suggest a lot more scoring, as well as the fact that, it's Indiana. So, they are going to give up a lot of points and score a lot themselves. So, yeah, it's that having Sudfeld and Howard for them, having their skill players healthy, I think, could make it a pretty competitive game.
Well, just Sudfeld. I mean, Xander Diamant is just not good. I mean, of a passer. The fact that he made those plays against Ohio State, I found to be just literally unbelievable.
Yeah, they were pulling stuff out of their ass. Right,
he cannot throw the ball.
Not sustainable.
But if Sudfeld played against Rutgers, it looks like he's okay. Probably a little bit hobbled, but that should mean some difficult times. So, all right, we've been here for a while.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to hit on Indiana before we give a score?
No, I got nothing.
All right, what's your score?
I hadn't even thought about this.
Yeah, I know. I just came up with mine as we were talking. I'm going 38-24 for Michigan State.
Sure. I'm gonna go higher. I'm gonna go 48-28. Let's say.
Wow, that's a lot. I mean, I know Indiana's offenses and defenses are good, but it's still an MSU offense. I mean, it's coming off of a good performance, but I'm curious to see. They seem to play down to their opponents, so we'll see what happens.
I think they'll give up some points. I mean, the upside is that if this MSU defense looks pretty good against Indiana and Nate Sudfeld, my confidence in those safeties goes up pretty dramatically. So that's interesting, at least.
Yeah. Before we go, what do you think of the name Rangers for the play, given that's the punt block formation? That's what D'Antonio seemed to call it, kind of along the lines of Rocket. That was the name of the deal. You've seen a lot of different try to play on words that I don't know if they've been all that great. What is your preferred name for this thing?
I've been struggling with that one too.
Here are some ones come up by SB Nation though. There was one of those. One was I enjoyed it the most, but it wasn't. I don't think you really go there. But there's the Gift 6, the Mitch 6, the Punt 6, the Quick 6, Agony in Ann Arbor, the Michigan State Miracle, the Punt, Fail to the Victors, Wolvie No, Sparty Yes, the Big House Blunder, Bungle Botch, other B words, Watts Just Happened, the Jackson 6, and what I laughed at this one is End Zone, the Snap, Drop, and Run Back of Michigan's Punt by John U. Bacon, playing off of the name of John Bacon's recent book about the Michigan program and the courting of Harbaugh. Is there any of those? Nothing has really stuck out to me. I think Rangers is going to be how it's remembered because it's a simple thing. I don't know if any of these puns or play on words is all that great.
Yeah, there's some issues that I have with some of the names, right? Like it's I dislike the Big House Blunder just because I think it sort of overemphasizes the Michigan part.
It puts it all on the punter, which
right.
A lot of it was his fault, but yeah, I can understand that. And you've had the miracle at Michigan already with the Cordell Stewart thing, so
right.
So that one's already taken.
NFL.com called it Miracle in Michigan 2, which I especially dislike because it doesn't makes sense. Like there's, with the Miami Florida State rivalry, they had, wide left 2 or wide right 2 or whatever. So like that made sense because it was the same game, right? So that one, Miracle in Michigan is not one that I like either. The Gift 6, I have similar qualms about. Yeah, it was a mistake by Michigan, but I just don't like the emphasis there. The Quick 6 I think is pretty good, given, but it was still 10 seconds. It's not like
right. I was trying to think of ways to play off of 10 seconds because there's like 10 seconds to. There's like a thing, right? 10 seconds. I mean, there's 10 seconds to Mars, the band. 10 seconds to Midnight as a.
Yeah, that's 30 seconds to Mars, but
30. Oh, it is. You're right. I typed in 10 seconds to Google, and Mars was one of the things.
Yeah.
10 seconds to Midnight is a song, I think.
Well, it was almost midnight, given how long that.
There's 10 minutes to midnight.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. But it's not a. I don't know. Like
the thing about it.
Kick 6 was just perfect, but this is a play that you can't really describe.
So right, I think that there's two problems. One is that the play itself is so ridiculous that it doesn't even make sense, right? Like calling it the punt doesn't really make sense because it's not a punt. So there's that. The other problem is that Watts Jackson's name is too long to effectively pun off of.
Yeah, like Watts worked, but then you got Jackson in there, and the hyphen thing makes it.
Yeah, it's too. Yeah, that's the other problem. So, yeah, I got nothing. I don't think that. I mean, I think the funny thing about it, at least right now, although I don't know that we'll only find out in the next couple of years, whatever we end up.
Yeah, I mean, is there a name for Doug? Is there a name for Doug Flutie's play, or is it just the Doug Flutie Hail Mary?
I think it's the Flutie Hail Mary. I think that's it.
I mean, this might just be the Michigan State fumble punt return.
Right, but that's right. Like, so when you're even saying that, it doesn't even like fumble punt return isn't even the right. It doesn't do it
justice.
Yeah, it doesn't even explain what, because to me, what that sounds like fumble punt return is that like there was a punt, the guy was returning it got fumbled, and then there was a return. But that's not how. Like, it's just so inexplicable a play that, yeah. So I was just thinking if there hadn't been just if there hadn't already been the play, I feel like just calling it the play is pretty good. But it's taken, which is too bad.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like the play should be like the band on the field play, right? Like that's.
I mean, no one really calls it the play. They call it Cal Stanford. They call it the band on the field.
Yeah, that's why I just like the play because I think it's so inexplicable.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just thinking if you're not a Michigan State fan, how what are you going to remember it as? You're going to remember it as, the botched punt return. Except for it's not a punt return; it's a return of a play that's a punt. So even that, it's not like a block punt that you can play off of that either. It's just what the hell just happened. That's what Connor Cook said. That's why Watts just happened is like a way to call it, but I don't think you can. I don't know. I'm out of ideas for this thing. You're out of ideas. I think it'll just be referred to as Michigan State's fumble return for a touchdown to win the game.
Right? Like you can't even referring to it is difficult. And the other thing I'll say about the Connor Cook thing is that that's an awesome quote, and I think that that's going to be used in highlights for college football forever. Right?
Yeah. Oh, and I never gave my thoughts on the radio calls. I thought McDonough's call was tremendous. He is arguably the best big play sports broadcaster in sports right now. He's been around it forever. He called Joe Carter's home run. I love McDonough and Spielman. They're a great team.
I agree. I like
great. McDonough's great. McDonough's got the voice inflections that work. Spielman's got the insight. And for McDonough's voice to crack, like that was perfect in terms of the context of the play. like Brad Nessler's call of the Little Giants. You know, it's a fake. Bates is gonna throw. He's got a man, touchdown. Michigan State wins it in overtime. The call of the year. Like, it was a great call, but it was like in the context of a thing that could happen. Like, this wasn't in the context. This fumble return wasn't in in the thought process. And for him to his voice to crack in disbelief, you know, for a professional speaker, for a professional, you know, exclaimer, his voice to crack, I think perfectly encapsulated that play. So I thought that was great. I thought the MSU radio call was okay. Jason Strayhorn really is what made it, because George Blaha is just really always delayed with how he's giving his analysis. I thought Brandstander did a good job of explaining what was going on, and the disbelief was there. But more for a radio call, you got to explain what's going on, and you're for MSU's call, you heard it's a fumble picked up, and then you hear a bunch of screaming, and then eventually he says touchdown MSU. I thought McDonough's call on the TV was absolutely perfect. He's very good at his job, and I'm surprised I haven't seen him on any radio shows locally or anything like that to talk about the play more, because it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The Blaha, here comes MSU is something, but yeah, McDonough's was the best.
Yeah. So, anything else you got to add?
No, I think that's it. Hopefully, we still have some listeners at this point.
Yeah, we won't make these normally this long. The last two have just been because of the importance of such games and the results of such games. Needed a lot of time to talk about. So if you've been listening, I really appreciate it. You can subscribe on iTunes. Just search The Only Colors. I'm told that that's a better way to find it. Just search The Only Colors on iTunes. Get automatic downloads. We've had a lot of great stuff on the site about this. We'll continue to with everything that goes on. I'm supposed to be at if anybody's a student, I'm supposed to be at the MSU Sports Journalism Alumni thingy on Friday conference. So if anybody's going, I'll try to see you there. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Fanini. He's at Jobin, Jobin, number 2, letter E. And we will talk to you guys next week. Perhaps under different circumstances, probably. So we'll see. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you.
See ya.